And all of those words are essentially two words in the Greek. Okay, it's a very interesting construction. We have two words. One's a participle, as you'd expect, the continually producing, and or a verbal adjective, and the other is an infinitive or verbal noun. Okay, first we start with the participle. We have the present active participle, masculine accusative plural of the verb agathapoieo. Agathapoieo. A-G-A-T-H-O-P-O-I-E, long O. Agathapoieo. That's one of the very, in Greek, they jam words together, sort of like in German, right? In German, if you don't really have a word that means something, you'll take two words that are close to what you want it to mean, and you put them together, and then all of a sudden that word means it. Okay, that's what they're doing here. And we can see here, if you take your vocabulary, you take this off, agatha, and this is the same as agathos, right? So we have agathos, which is good, of intrinsic value, okay? And we have poieo, and poieo means... Wow, I'm hearing myself coming back. I'm in the future. Anyway, we have poieo, which means to produce or to make, right? And so we have here we have the production of divine good. Okay, it means to produce divine good. Agathos, the good that we produce, that's good of intrinsic nature, can only be good of intrinsic nature when we're doing it inside of the divine dynasphere. It can only be produced as divine good. Okay, so we have to produce divine good. The present tense, it means continual action, okay, or linear action, and as participle, it's a verbal adjective used as a substantive. So that's why we have to have the ones in there, okay? As an example of, I use that word all the time, a substantive, saying this adjective is used as a substantive. The idea of an adjective used as a substantive would be, for example, we have it in English. For example, if someone asks you, which jelly beans do you like? And you answer the red, the idea is the red ones. Okay, you're using the adjective red as as a substantive. I like the red ones, right? And you add the word ones instead of saying I like the red jelly beans. Okay, you don't have to give the noun jelly beans. You just say the red ones. Okay, and that's what we have here. We have the ones continually producing, the idea is which ones? Continually producing ones, right? Okay, so I just thought I'd give you that. But this needs to be preceded by the transitional conjunction that in order to smoothly give us that transition. And so we have, and it is elliptical, so we have that the ones continually producing divine good. Okay, then we get a present active infinitive of the verb timao. T-I-M, tim-a-o, yeah, T-I-M-O, long O, ma-o. And this is an infinitive of purpose. Infinitives come in different ways. This is what's called an infinitive of purpose, giving us a reason or purpose that an action was done. Okay, timao means to tie shut. Okay. The most basic word used in Attic Greek, okay, to tie shut. And in Attic literature, okay, it's an explanation of what's done to an animal to prevent it from snatching up grain while on the threshing floor. Right? They didn't have machines back then, so when you wanted to thresh or you wanted to grind, you did it by Samson power or you did it by animal power, okay? And if you got a room full of grain that you're trying to grind or thresh, you don't want to lose most of it to your workers, right? Which in this case are animals, so you tie their mouths shut, right? It reminds me of an old cartoon I saw one time where this guy's in a donut shop, the owner of the donut shop, and you can see he's got his books open, and you see some piles of money, and he's going, I don't understand it, because the number of donuts that I go through in a week, I should be making a lot more money than this. And you see the janitor over in the background with the broom, and he's about this big, Aha, well, you know what, that happened, So they would tie their mouths shut. Now, what's important here, okay, is then figuratively means to put to silence, but specifically to keep someone from being able to argue back. Okay, it's not like keeping them from making any sounds at all, right? You know, when you tied the mule's mouth shut, he could still grunt and groan and, you know, make noises. He just couldn't eat. Okay, he couldn't eat your produce, okay, or your product. Here, the idea is that we're going to tie someone, you know, we're going to muzzle them, not shout them down like, you know, the liberals have, you know, and prevent them from being able to talk at all. Okay, it's just this is going to silence them from being able to make an argument, and it's going to silence them. The idea is it's going to silence them from the inside. You know, you're not tying, you know, it's figurative. You're not tying their mouth shut. You know, you're not getting out a needle and sewing their lips shut like they used to do to the dead, right? You know, instead, you're going to have information that they're not going to be able to refute. See, it's that whole idea. Remember, this is, again, sometimes because of the speed that we go at, you forget, you know, where we were, right? But, you know, just a couple weeks ago, we were at the idea that we are being witnesses. I mean, we are being witnessed by other individuals who want to ridicule us, who want to slander us. Well, this is going to stop that slandering. This is going to shut them up, okay? So, it's specifically to deprive someone of an argument. And with concept of purpose, we have in order to muzzle, silence, meaning completely keep the person from answering, okay, with regard to this specific topic. Okay, so this is the will of God that the ones continually producing divine good produce it in order to muzzle, silence. And we had to have the elliptical produce it verb in order for our infinitive here, the infinitive of purpose, to be tied to it. Okay, so I've included that. And then next we have the spiritual ignorance, and spiritual is in line with two lines through it. Of the foolish men, and the foolish men is underlined, comma. And you know what? Sometimes I don't always get the single and double parens, and the divine. If you want to go back into just a little bit previous here in the verse, divine should actually have two lines through it because it is part of the connotation of the word, just like spiritual is part of the connotation of this word. It's included in it. It's not needed in the Greek because the Greek has it, but it's needed in the English. So it's not really elliptical. Per se, meaning that it was left out on purpose. It's not needed in the Greek, so it's just not added. So go back and put under the divine good, okay, you know, put it in parens with two lines through it, just like the spiritual here. So we have the spiritual ignorance of the foolish men, comma. So we have emphasis here because we have a genitive clause smack in the middle of an accusative construction. In other words, the genitive separates the actual accusative noun from its article. We have two articles right on top of each other, okay? So we'll get to the accusative first. We have the feminine accusative singular of the articular noun, agnosia. Sound familiar? Agnosia, A-G-N-O-S-I-A, agnosia. And agnosia means ignorance. But predominantly it means ignorance in the intellectual sense, but, excuse me, ignorance not predominantly in the intellectual sense, but instead a lack of religious experience or a lack of spiritual discernment. That's why I have spiritual there. Spiritual is part of the word. Okay, so it's a lack of spiritual discernment. This is obviously a cognate of agnostos, okay? And agnostos, which of course pertains to that which is unknown because of a lack of spiritual information. And, of course, we understand that's the actual root of our word agnostic, okay? Agnostic is a person who believes that nothing can be known of the existence or nature of God, okay, and therefore neither believes nor disbelieves, right? You know, you have the atheists and you have the agnostics. The atheists don't believe there's a God, okay, which in and of itself is kind of an interesting concept, okay, to have someone who is so dead set against believing so that something exists and therefore, you know, show that it really does exist. But anyway, the atheists are anti-theists, right? You know, they don't you know, atheism is the what am I trying to say? The alpha primitive negative, okay, plus theism, which means no God, okay? So they don't believe in God. Okay, agnostic is where we have from here agnosia, or agnostos, which means I don't know, okay? I don't think I can know, and therefore I'm not going to try. So you believe there's a God, you believe there isn't a God, I'm kind of like in the middle. Okay, like if you ever saw Brother, Where Art Thou, right? And you got three guys, and the one guy, says to the middle guy, are you for me? And the other guy says, are you for me? And the middle guy says, I'm for you fellers. He doesn't pick one, right? That's the agnostic, right? He's going to be the straddling the fence, okay? Since the word actually has a spiritual connotation, I've obviously included it in parentheses in the English to make sure that we understand the context. And of course, I said it was articular, so we have the spiritual ignorance. So the spiritual ignorance. Then we have the genitive that was emphatic, the genitive that I skipped. We start with the masculine genitive plural of the adjective aphron. A-P-H-R-O-N, aphron. Aphron is an alpha negative of a word, but aphron means the lack of prudence or good judgment. It means foolish, senseless, and even silly, okay? The word foolish in the English means lack of good sense. Therefore, I translated it as foolish. See, the foolish person is one that doesn't have any sense, okay? Any common sense. You can see fools all the time in academia, right? We have a lot of foolish professors who are educated to the point of their incompetence. That's what they used to say a doctoral degree is, right? It's where you're educated to the point that you're past your competence. Okay. Also used to stand for piling it higher and deeper. But anyway, that's if you look at the letters for that. Anyway, this is then followed by a masculine genitive plural. It's a masculine genitive plural of the articular noun, as we would expect, anthropos. A-N-T-H-R, long O, P-O-S, anthropos. And anthropos means man, with emphasis on him being a member of the human race. It's anthropos as opposed to angelos, man as opposed to angels. Okay? This focuses on his being in existence with an old sin nature. See, whenever we have anthropos, we have to remember that we're talking about mankind. Mankind is what? Is inherently corrupt. We have an old sin nature. That doesn't mean, okay, that you have to discount man forever or anything like that. By being born with an old sin nature, that means you're born with the aptitude of being saved, with the potential of being saved, right? So actually, it's what gives us the opportunity to be saved. Like Jack used to say, you can't save a drowning person if they're in the desert. If they're not drowning, you can't save them, okay? If they're not lost, you can't find them, okay? So being born with an old sin nature and fallen gives us the opportunity to be saved. But what it does mean is that we're not inherently good, like people want us to believe. People want us to believe that the baby that's born is inherently good. And therefore, we have to do everything possible to save every human life because it's inherently good. Or we are surprised when someone acts out on their old sin nature because people foolishly think humans are inherently good. We're not. We are born with an old sin nature, and unless you are saved and you've learned how to take in doctrine, use doctrine to counteract the influence of that old sin nature, you are going to produce human good and evil. Whether that human good and evil looks good, like Dan Carvey's church lady on Saturday Night Live, okay, or looks evil, like Hitler, okay? We are not inherently good. I see that all the time. You'll have someone in a neighborhood, usually a cul-de-sac. We lived in a cul-de-sac for a long time. I always used to think, I wonder what's going to go on in this cul-de-sac, right? But they live in a neighborhood, and they kill all their kids and the family pets, and like in Scottsdale, light the house on fire, right? And the neighbors go, I'm so surprised. Why? Why are you surprised? People are not inherently good. In many cases, you should be shocked that it didn't happen earlier. But people are good at putting up a facade, and I understand that. Okay, but the idea here is anthropos is with emphasis on an old sin nature. Okay, so we have ignorance of foolish men, and of course, even though it's in the masculine, the idea is that it includes both men and women. We're talking about mankind, and in the Greek, okay, they still use the masculine many times for the general case, okay, like we do in English. We're supposed to do in English. A chairman can still be a woman. It didn't have to be a chairwoman, but somewhere along the line we decided we had to. So anyway, so all together in verse 15, and you can see why I'm putting 15 and 16 together. All together in verse 15 we have, for such is the will of the God, that the ones continually producing divine, and here's where you should put 2 lines through it, good, produce it in order to muzzle, silence the spiritual ignorance of the foolish men, comma. And while we're here, I always want to make sure I have a record of what I taught as opposed to what I thought I was going to teach. Oops, wrong one, Paul. Okay, for such is the will of the God, that the ones continually producing divine good produce it in order to muzzle, silence the spiritual ignorance of the foolish men. So how do you keep people from slandering you? No, you're not going to keep them from slandering you, but how do you keep it from being effective? How do you silence them? How do you end the argument without arguing? See, that's the case. How do you end the argument without arguing? You produce divine good. You do your job as unto the Lord. And there's nothing they can say that'll counteract what you're doing. So that goes in line with the idea that you never trust what people are going to say until you've seen them do what they say they're going to do. See? You could say, oh, I'm going to do this tomorrow. And how many times do you hear someone say, I'm going to do this tomorrow, and it doesn't happen? How many times have we had people say, oh yeah, I'm going to come to church, and then they never show up? I was talking to Larry yesterday, okay, and we were kind of on that topic, and he says, yeah, it's almost comical, right? When the minute someone starts to say, well, I'm going to come to, he wants to stop them, right? Just stop right there. Don't even finish the sentence, okay? Because one of 2 things will happen. Either the angelic conflict will try and make it so that you don't come, and you end up with 4 flat tires and you can't make it, or you're just blowing smoke up my skirt, okay? In either case, don't say it. If you're going to do it, do it. You don't need to announce it, right? But the idea is you judge people on what they do, not what they say. And this is a very good example of this. The Christians that use Christian vocabulary, praise this, oh thank God, God willing, all of that kind of vocabulary, okay, are saying things. What are they doing? Are they in the divine dynasphere? Are they producing divine good? Are they using doctrine? Do they get doctrine? Do they even understand doctrine? If you ask them about sin, do they understand sin? If you ask them about the gospel, do they truly understand the gospel, or do they have the social gospel? Good little boys go to heaven and bad little boys go to hell. Watch, observe, just like we're being watched and observed. And the argument will be silenced when you do what you're supposed to do in the divine dynasphere. That's the will of God. And so here, for such is the will of the God, that the ones continually producing divine good produce it in order to muzzle, silence the spiritual ignorance of the foolish men. The other side of that is that when you don't produce the divine good, then you're giving them fodder. Okay, you're giving them material to use against you, and rightly so. Okay, so, but that doesn't end the sentence. We have a comma here, and we're going to get some more information about the manner in which you do this and who's doing it. Okay? And so for such is the will of the God, that the ones continually producing divine good produce it in order to muzzle, slant, silence the spiritual ignorance of the foolish men. And then we have, and this is elliptical, producing divine good as free men. Well, this is, of course, taking us all the way back to the ones producing divine good. Okay? So producing divine good as free men. We start here with an elliptical construction. It's ellipsis designed by the fact that we have an adverb with no verb. Okay, so we go back to the last verb, which was also elliptical, and leads us all the way back to the idea of producing divine good. So we're talking about producing divine good. And we see how we're supposed to do these productions. Okay, we start the phrase in the verse, actually, with the adverbial conjunction hos. So we start with hos, H-O-S. This word means as, so, in the same way or like. And here we get the idea of the proper connotation simply from as. Denotation simply from as. Next, we have a word that we're going to actually see in two forms in the same verse. First, we get this, which is the masculine nominative plural of the adjective eleutheros. Eleutheros, E-L-E-U-T-H-E-R-O-S. Eleutheros. And once again, it's used as a substantive. It's an adjective used as a substantive. The ones who are free or free men. Okay? The word means free, but has the focus of being free socially. It's not just free as in, you know, I'm free, thank God Almighty, I'm free. Okay? The idea is I'm free socially, politically. I have self-determination. I am independent, and I'm not bound to anyone. So it has not only the freedom of not being bound, but it has a connotation of being socially free and politically free. Free as opposed to being a slave. Here, as a substantive, and in the plural masculine, it means free men. But it refers to mankind, including both males and females. Okay? This is what we're going to start seeing more of, hopefully. Okay? Is freedom. And I think this is what's scaring the bejeebers out of those who are rioting, who are upset, because all of the little special snowflake guarantees that they've had, okay, that has kept them enslaved, are going to be removed. People are going to be treated as people, not as black people or white people or male people or female people, you know, or people who don't know what the heck they are. They belong to some, you know, acronym like LBGTQ+, you know, Q+, okay, where they get to pick whatever they want to be when they wake up in the morning, if they're going to be anything at all. Right? Yeah. We were talking the other day and heard a term that, you know, I'd heard before, but I'd forgotten, you know, that they use that term, you know, of pansexual. You have asexual, you know, male, female, and pansexual, which it means like you're open to everything, I guess, because pan means all, right? Yeah. So you're all sexes, all at the same time, whatever all means, because apparently you don't have male and female, you've got everything in between, right? So anyway, the idea is that all of these restrictions are going to start going away, these special cases, these special things, and that's what you have in a free society. And in a free society, you make your choices and you live with the decisions of those choices. That's going to be great. People are terrified because they might fail. Yep, that's freedom. But if you can't fail, you can't succeed. The same people who are making sure that you don't fail do that because they're above you and also making sure that you don't succeed. Because if you succeed, you're going to take their spot. You don't need them anymore. See, that's part of what's scaring these people is you've got a president now, okay, who doesn't need the money, doesn't need the fame, Doesn't need to put it on his resume like so many of the other presidents that we've had lately, who you get the idea that the only reason they wanted to be president is not because they had any concern over the country, but because they wanted to have it on their resume. They wanted people to idolize them. Oh yeah, when I step down, I'm going to give a hour-and-a-half speech about how great I am and what legacy I'm leaving behind. How disgusting, right? Those are the people who don't want you to exceed because you will replace them. Instead, you have an individual who's succeeded. Okay? He doesn't need to succeed. He's already been a success. As I was telling the family, I think it's going to be interesting to see, because I don't think this guy is going to be one of those that goes to Camp David for 2 weeks, right? This guy's a workaholic. You're going to end up seeing Congress, out of breath. The senators and the congressmen are going to go, slow down, we can't run that fast. And he's going to say, I don't care. Push, 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 push. This needs to be done. This needs to be changed, right? As Andrew said, yeah, after 1 year, he goes, okay, I'm all done. We're not going to hold Congress for the next 3 years. We don't need laws anymore. But the idea is, okay, is focusing on freedom, removing the restrictions, removing the safety net. In a free society, you don't have the safety net. Not to the extent that we have it. You maybe have a safety net as opposed to a safety blanket with a mattress 3 inches from your high wire. But anyway, producing divine good as free men. Not having / using your freedom. And not having / using your freedom. We start here, as you'd expect, with conjunction kai. Whoa! Well, we did start with conjunction kai, K-A-I, meaning and. Then we have the negative used with other than the indicative, may, M-E, meaning not. Well, I thought I did really well this time. I had all the underlines in there and everything. Anyway, it's followed then by the present active participle, masculine nominative plural, of a word we've seen before, echo. E-C-H, long O, echo. And echo means to have and to hold. Primarily, though, to have under one's own possession. You have it in your possession, and you have it in your possession to be able to do with it what you want to do with it. It's yours. So that's part of freedom, by the way, is the right to own property. If you can't possess something and call it yours, okay, if it's, well, it's mostly mine, but a big chunk of it belongs to the government, okay, or it's, it's not really mine because I can't own it, I can only lease it, or, blah, 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 then you don't have freedom. But here, this is another one of those words, actually, that tells us about freedom, to have and to hold, okay, in your possession, with the idea of doing something with it. And the idea then is using. In particular, as a participle, we have not having, and so, and it means to use. So in not having and using, okay. So I've included that in parens. We skip to the next phrase then, since it's out of order. And we go to the noun that this participle modifies. We have the feminine accusative singular of the articular noun. Once again, eleutheria. We saw euleutheros, and now we see eleutheria. E-L-E-U-T-H-E-R-I-A. That's obviously a cognate of eleutheros, which we just saw that meant free. Here, we have the state of being free, or the state of existing in freedom. So it comes to mean freedom, liberty, or the right to self-determination. That's what freedom is, the right to self-determination. With the article, we have the freedom, giving us the idea that it's a specific freedom. And of course, it's that freedom that the individuals are living in the 5 Asian provinces, okay, under Rome. Rome was really good at allowing people to have some freedom, okay? It's obviously what we have by living in a nation that abides by the laws of divine establishment, mostly, okay, established by God, and give us then freedom. So, and not having / using your freedom as a facade for evil, comma. as a facade for the evil. I'm sorry, it's articulate for the evil. And that's underlined. It was emphasized by hyperbaton. This verse, this entire verse is really interesting because it's really chopped up and it's very emphatic, and it has a lot of ellipsis, and it took quite a bit of time to make sure that I was going back and getting the right things, okay? So anyway, this starts, as one would expect, with the conjunction hos again, H-O-S, meaning as. In the same way, like, whatever. So we have as. This is then followed by the neuter accusative singular of a noun, epikaluma. Epikaluma. E-P-I-K-A-L-U-M-M-A. Epikaluma. I just kept thinking of the Raiders of the Lost Ark movies with Kalimos. Anyway, epikaluma. Okay. And epikaluma is obviously a compound. When we see things that start with epi or pros or whatever, they're compounds. Epi is a marker of location or surface. It means on, in, above, or over, etc. And then kaluma means a veil or covering that hides the face. And consequently, I'm slow enough for you to write it. I know I get going fast. Consequently, it's used figuratively to mean something that hides the intent of the soul. When you hide the face, the idea is what's right behind your face. Right behind your face is your brain, which of course is the connection to the soul. So right behind your face essentially is your soul. That's why they tell you things like, you know, the eyes or the windows into the soul, right? Well, you know, and Jack used to talk about in the martial arts, you know, one of the things you know, you had to do is you watch the person's eyes. You don't necessarily watch their movements. Okay, you know, and it's the classic gunfighter scene, right? You know, the gunfighters, and I always couldn't figure that out because they'd show them like at opposite ends of town. It's like, how can you even see the guy's eyes, right? You know, but they always talk about the guy's eyes, and they do a great job of it in Three Amigos, because you know these guys are going into a duel, right? And they're staring at each other's eyes, and then all of a sudden the one squints like this, and the other one opens his eyes really big, right? You know, and that's when the gunfight starts, right? You know, but the idea is it's the eyes or the windows to the soul. Well, your whole face. Yeah, there used to be a show on TV about you know, an individual who had gotten to the point where he was really good at body language and facial recognition, and you know, he could see little ticks that would you know, show things. You know, people try and hide something, but the movement of their lips, the flaring of the nostril, the squinting of the eyes, the opening of the pupil, all of those things give you away. So what do? You wear a veil. And so the idea here is a veil that's covering the soul, the intent of the soul. Okay, and so. The word then literally is a veil over or a veil in front of, okay? That's what it would be literally, okay? But the word epikaluma then actually comes to mean that which causes something to be known or as to appear to be other than it really is. Therefore causing its true nature to be unknown. It means a device as a means of hiding. It means pretext, covering something up. It's from Leonidas' book, it's electronic 2856, okay? And the word for something that hides or covers up the true nature of something in the English is a facade. I don't know why the general translator, you won't find any of the translators using facade, okay? But that's exactly what we have. The meaning of a facade is, quote, this is coming from Webster, quote, an outward appearance that is maintained to conceal a less pleasant or credible reality, end quote. Okay, that's exactly what we're talking about here. You have evil, you have a less credible, right? Or less pleasant reality being covered up. That's a facade. know, it's the idea of the old Westerns where you had the huge storefronts, and then they walk through the door and they have a little bitty one-room shop, right? And you can still see some of that if you go out to Pioneer or something like that, right? You know, we used to see it in old Western movies, right? You know, they had the saloon, and then it has a big, you know, a big front to it, right? You know, it's a little bitty saloon inside. Okay, that's a facade. This, of course, is then followed by the feminine dative singular of the articular noun kakia. K-A-K-I-A. It's not kakos, it's kakia. It sounds like we're in the tiki room. Kaka, cuckoo, kiki. Anyway, kakia. And we've seen kakos before, meaning pertaining to being bad, with the implication of harmful and damaging. And we usually translate that as evil or bad. But here, kakia is closely related, but it means evil with the idea of the quality of wickedness. So kakos emphasizes the act of evil, but kakia emphasizes the quality of being evil. Unfortunately, there's no real way in English to bring out the difference very easily. Okay, so we'll have to make sure that we get it in the notes. Okay. But the idea is we just go ahead and it's going to be evil, okay? With the article, we're talking about a certain form of evil, which of course is the opposite of divine good, meaning evil produced while in the cosmic system and out of fellowship. So we're talking about cosmic evil, if you will, okay? Satanic, we're part of Satan's plan. As a dative rather than a genitive, we have for evil rather than of evil. So it's not as a facade of evil, of the evil, it's a facade for the evil, okay? It's a place to hide it. And the whole phrase is underlined due to the emphasis that was given in the structure. We have hyperbaton. And then we finish the verse and sentence with this last phrase, which is, but, underline, comma. And then we have to bring in the elliptical, the same ellipsis we had before, producing divine good. So that's in parens with a single line through it, but producing divine good as a slave of God, period. So I love it. We're free men. We have freedom, but while at the same time we're slaves. Ooh. if I had you know, purple smoke, my head would blow off. No, the idea is that we are both, and the more we become a slave, that's the oxymoron. The more we become the slave, the freer we are. The more we understand doctrine and how to function properly in doctrine, and we use it, and we are a slave to God and the dictates of God, the freer we are. The more enjoyment we have. The more freedom we have associated with a relaxed mental attitude. We don't have to worry. God is taking care of us. We don't have to fear. God is protecting us. We don't have to be concerned about what's going on in the future. We live for today, for the blessings we have today. We get that through doctrine, through the proper application of doctrine. And that is what makes us a slave. And the more we submit, the more we become a slave, the freer we get. Okay? So we start, as one would expect, with the strong conjunction of contrast, Allah, A-L-L-A. And we've always, when possible, translated this as but with an underline and a comma. It gives us that oomph, that strength, as opposed to de, which is a weaker form. Then we have the ellipsis, of course, designed by the fact that once again, we're going to have hos, okay? For the adverb, and we need to have the verb, and it's elliptical, and it's talking about producing divine good. It's not talking about having the facade, obviously. You're not supposed to have the facade, okay? So we go back and get the ellipsis, producing divine good. And then, as you'd expect, we have the adverbial conjunction hos, once again, H-O-S, meaning as. And then we have the masculine nominative plural of the anarthrous noun, doulos, D-O-U-L-O-S. L-O-S, doulos. And doulos means slave. Okay? It's one of the strongest words in the Greek for slave, and it never means servant. Somewhere along, along the 1800s, when slavery was a very big topic in social circles, okay, and everything, then you couldn't say slave, right? So you couldn't have the Bible say slave because slave was naughty, okay? But this, and so everything got changed to servant. But this isn't a servant. This is a slave. This is an individual who has to think and do what the master tells him to think and do. And that's exactly what we do. Okay? So slave. And of course, as without the article, we have a slave. And then we finish with the masculine genitive singular, as you'd expect of the unorthodox noun, theos again. Theos. Of course, it means God with emphasis on his deity, author, and power. And here, it doesn't have the article, so we have of God. Okay, as opposed to of the God. We already had the God, so we were already oriented to which God we were talking about, and now we just have of God. Okay? So we're a slave to the perfect master. Okay? And guess what? The Bible doesn't say anything bad about slavery, that you're not supposed to be a slave. It tells us to be a slave. Okay? Someday we'll go into a doctrine on slavery. So altogether, I want to make sure we have it all together. Okay? We have verse 15. For such is the will of thee, God, that the ones continually producing divine good produce it in order to muzzle, silence, the spiritual ignorance of the foolish men, producing divine good as free men, and not having, using your freedom as a facade for the evil, but producing divine good as a slave of God. So what's the will of God for you? It's to be a slave. It's to produce divine good. Okay? And that's going to lead us to an analysis, which we will pick up in the next class. Okay? But before we end the class, we're also, of course, going to do true spiritual giving. And of course, when we do true spiritual giving, we do it like we do everything. Okay? We do it based on doctrine. And so what doctrines do we use? What verses do we use? Okay, we go through the same ones each week. You should have these memorized by now. We've been doing it for 20 years, 30 years almost now, since 1981. So it's been a long time, 36 years. Okay. On the first day of every week, let each one of you, according to his own judgment, be putting aside and saving, according to how he might be prospering. The idea, of course, as we always say, is it's based on prosperity. It's not based on mandate. It's not based on anything else that I'm going to pressure you on, okay? It's based on prosperity. No prosperity, you can't give. Lots of prosperity, you should be able to give lots, okay? We have each one, it's principle, each one should give just as he himself has decided what is the right amount in his heart, slant right lobe, not out from sorrow, pain, distress, reluctance. That means worrying about losing funds, worrying about, oh, gee, if I give, I'm not going to be able to have this, okay? Or if I don't give, something horrible is going to happen. Nor out from compulsion, slant pressure, okay? We don't have someone come around and break your kneecaps. If you did, I'd have a heck of a lot more money, okay? But nobody's going to come around and break your kneecaps, okay, because you're not giving, okay? I never see, that's one of the things that Jackson set up very well in our Constitution and very well in the processes, which I've continued to follow, is I don't see who gives. And when I was treasurer, Jack never saw who gave. Someone could have come in and given $1 million, okay, and Jack wouldn't have known it except when we do the balance sheet at the end of the year. But he wouldn't have known who did it, and that's a very good protection, because what that means is that you're not going to teach to the wealthy. So we have many churches that are afraid to say something, because if they say something, the person that's got all the money is going to go away. So they're not going to teach God's word. They're only going to teach God's word to the extent that it doesn't offend somebody. I don't care if I offend you. You ought to know that by now. Okay, I don't intentionally offend you. I don't intentionally use words just to see you squirm. But if the Bible uses a word, if the Bible's going to be offensive and use offending you to snap you out of something and get you to do something correctly, you're going to get it. Because guess what? I got it first. Ooh, I'm so offended. Okay. So the idea is, okay, you give, okay, as a cheerful, satisfied giver. Then we have a dictate and a promise given to us. We have Proverbs 3, 9 and 10, honor the Lord from your prosperity and from the first of all your income. And if you do, your storehouses shall be filled with superabundance, and your vats shall overflow with new wine. So if you have been prospered and you're supposed to be giving, and you give under the understanding of what giving is, and you do it properly as a cheerful, satisfied giver, you're going to have prosperity. Okay? If you don't, you won't. You're not performing. This is another, what is the will of God for me? Well, here's another indication of the will of God for you. This is how you function properly in spiritual giving. That's God's will. Okay, doctrine as the truth of the truth. Okay, true wealth, plus a very important warning says, for you see, if the eagerness, willingness, readiness, and that all sums up to positive volition, is present, this is perfectly acceptable. We have a very emphatic part. To the degree that he might be having. In other words, you can't give what you don't have. And that's what it says next. It is not perfectly acceptable to the degree that he is not having. If you try to give what you don't have, you're destroying the whole concept of the memorial. Whoops. So, that was it. I don't know where I went. Okay, so the idea is now we're going to go ahead and give you a few moments of silence in order to go to God in prayer and exhale back to him the true wealth of his economy, which of course is your understanding and doctrine that you've received. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and pass the container around so that if you've been prospered in the temple area and you're going to give, you have the opportunity to do so. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come to you and properly use the memorial of true spiritual giving, to be able to exhale to you a portion of what we receive from you concerning doctrine, concerning the importance of the information that you give us on a continuing basis. The fact that not only do you give us the information, you give us the opportunity to use it. You give us the opportunity to cycle it, to be able to apply it and see the magnificence of it in action, to develop the confidence for the information that you've given us, to be able to share the information with others, to be able to advance in ranks with those believers, and to be able to pass your word on as gospel information to those who are unbelievers. And for that, we are truly grateful, the opportunity to act as slaves and to be slaves, and to be able to be slaves using the information that you have provided for us. And for that, we are truly grateful. And we pray in Christ's name, amen. Okay, we're going to go ahead and end with a song. I believe we're singing from the folders, and we're going to sing song number 2. Remember, we will, after this song, we will go ahead and break for about 10 minutes. And then, because I did keep you over a little bit, I said 15. But we'll break until quarter after. So whenever we get done, we'll break until quarter after, come back, have the annual congregational meeting, at which point then we will break for a little bit and give you a chance to stretch your legs, and then we'll pick up with the second class. And I have something a little bit different in the second class that we've never done before. And so I'm going to scare you and tell you that it's going to be different, and you'll see. Okay.